Good afternoon. Welcome to this demonstration of AlphaVAT 4.1. By way of introduction, my name is Dhruv. I'm part of the professional services team here at Tax Systems. In terms of what we want to show you today, it will be the consolidation of a group VAT return, and then I'll be able to show you the submission through to HMRC. Now, the first thing to note about AlphaVAT is that it's a cloud-based solution hosted on Microsoft Azure. When you log in, you'll be asked to put your username and password, and then you will get the two-factor authentication. You have the choice of sending a code or calling. In this instance, I'm going to send a code to my phone. I type in the number, and that will take me to what we refer to as our entity management screen. Now, the entity management screen is one central repository where you can have a list of all your entities. Within there, you can add folders. It will give you the next obligation period, and it will give you the next obligation due. You'll also be able to see the status of your submission. Now, further points before we look at the actual demonstration is the user management side of things. So within the software, you have the ability to add users. You can restrict the user role access, and you can suppress or you can define the access to the root folder. That is completely up to you. You've got full discretion, and you can remove and add users at your own will. Lastly, we have the help menu. So again, a lot of material has been stored online with regards to frequently asked questions, training videos, technical support. The same team that support AlphaVAT, I will be supporting AlphaTax and AlphaVAT. Now, if I go back to the entity management screen, other things to note is we have a notifications option. So if there's any sort of downtime from HMRC, we can push any notifications through you. If there's any internal notifications we want to push through, then we have the ability to do so. There is also the option of alerts. And again, while the process or while multiple people are going through the VAT return process, you'll be able to see at what stage you're at. Now, in terms of setting the scene as to what I would like to show you this afternoon, we have got an entity whereby, in this example, I've got 3 companies. Example 1, example 2, I've used AlphaBridge, this is our phase 1 solution for MTD, to get a VAT liability. And when I go through the option for the top co using AlphaVAT, we will eventually consolidate all 3 entities into the one and then submit to HMRC. So your initial starting point is when you click into an entity, you'll be presented with a screen whereby on the right-hand side, you have the option to use AlphaBridge, which is again phase 1. And on the left-hand side, you've got AlphaVAT, which is what I'm going to walk through. Now, one of the main premises behind using AlphaVAT is to remove the need to use Excel. Again, a lot of clients we've spoken to have got information out of their ERP systems. They upload that information into an Excel working spreadsheet, and then calculations are done there. AlphaVAT removes the need to use that Excel working spreadsheet. You can do this through the system. So to get started, we go through a series of questions to define the properties of the company. In this instance, I'm going to say the business is fully recoverable, so no partial exemption. If I have any international issues, I can flag the relevant options. The next bit is getting your source data into AlphaVAT. So from your ERP system, you'll be able to extrapolate data in the form of a CSV file. You can then upload that information into AlphaVAT. So in the example I have on screen, I've got an example of a sales and a purchase ledger. I can upload that information into AlphaVAT. And while the information uploads, I will apply tags. So in this example, what I've done is I've created tags for the sales and the purchase ledgers. I'm going to now apply the relevant tags to the relevant file. The reason why I have done this is whether you're filing on a quarterly basis or a monthly basis, you will now apply the tags and the system will retain the mapping. So when you roll forward to the next period, the mapping in the file will be retained. The next bit is to look at what does our source data look like. So again, if I go in the example of a purchase ledger, you will see a whole host of transactions. Now within the software, what has happened is while this data was ingested in, it went through a series of data checks. It looked at anything with an unexpected VAT rate, any transaction whereby it was outside of the VAT return period, and any sort of examples of duplicate transactions. And later I'll be able to show you what they look like. But before you actually produce the VAT return, you have the ability to block and exclude certain transactions. A good example is if I use the search filter within AlphaVAT. If I look at the example of anything whereby a nominal code meets the 9010 number, I can now use the filter to search through the data. In this example, it has picked up 7 items in relation to custom entertainment. So I can tell the system I want to block the input VAT. The net effect of this is to block the VAT amount going into box 4, takes the net amount into box 7. So I've now blocked the input VAT, and this will be highlighted on screen for you. Similarly, you may have scenarios where you decide you may want to exclude, for example, intercompany transactions. Again, you can exclude certain transactions if required. Lastly, you also have the ability to edit line transactions. So if there was a scenario whereby the source data has come into the system, you're unhappy with possibly a tax code, you have the ability to edit a line transaction. You can change any of these columns, and you'll see the original option, and you have a reason for the edit. So those options are available. Now, the next stage is to map your source data. Now, what we have done over the last year is done the VAT implementation for you with our professional services VAT implementation team. What they do is they will take a cut of your data and they will map it accordingly based on what the reports that come through your ERP system. So in the example I have on screen, I'm going to map the VAT and the net amount. These are the mandatory fields that are required to produce the VAT return. But to make my reports richer, I'm going to map some further fields. Now, what I'm doing on screen is not part of the overall user experience. As I mentioned before, this is done by our VAT implementation team. To give you the reassurance that the numbers flow as they should, we will do a parallel run. So we will take a cut of a prior year quarter that you've already submitted. And what we will do is we will run that through the system, and then we will be able to get to the correct numbers and give you the reassurance that the numbers are as when you submitted them to the revenue. Once this is done, all we have to do is tell the system to run the calculation. So in terms of a summary of what I've already done, I've ingested the information from my ERP system into AlphaVAT. The mapping, which is what I've been doing, is already done in the background. And all you'd have to do is confirm selection and run calculation. So what the system is now doing, it will churn through that source data, and it will then drive what goes through to box 1 down to box 9 based on the information that I've uploaded. So if we give this a few seconds, you will see that as the progress bar is updated, you get to your 9 boxes with the numbers in there. Now, at the start of the demonstration, I mentioned that the system goes through a series of data checking, data validation. And so if we go to the Transactions tab, what the system has recognized is that there are 51 rows that need to be reviewed out of both the sales and the purchase ledger. So again, if we look into that, the system has highlighted there are 45 transactions that have an unexpected VAT rate. Again, these unexpected VAT rates might be warranted. The example I have on screen is a mixed supply, and so I'm happy that the VAT rates are mixed rate. I can review, and if I'm happy with what I see, I can tell the system I'm going to mark as expected, and I'm going to update. Now, if we look further, and if we go back in, potentially you might have transactions which are duplicate. In the example here, I've got duplicate transactions. So I'm going to mark as duplicate. I'm going to mark this one as duplicate, and I can update. So these data checks, I've shown you two. And the last one I'm going to look at is anything whereby a transaction is outside of the VAT return period. We also give you the ability to specify your own parameters in the future. So if you want to look at anything with a, let's say, invoice value of a certain amount, we'll be able to specify your own parameters and you can review that data. So I'll just wait for this calculation to run. And what I can then do, I'll just wait for that to run. I'm just going to go into my purchase ledger, into my sales ledger, sorry. Now, in this example, source data potentially contains transactions that occurred after the return period. So again, you can toggle. You can see that these are July transactions and I'm looking at a June period. I have the ability to mark as out period and I can update that file. Now, once that's been updated, the relevant changes will flow through into the VAT return. The next thing to look at is what happens if we have to make an adjustment that's outside of our ERP system. So again, if you focus your eyes to the Adjustments tab, you will see that I've got the option of a manual adjustment. Now, each of these narratives that you see on screen relate to a box in the VAT return. So the AlphaVAT relates to box 1 and 6. So I'm just waiting for that to come through. I've got EU acquisitions for box 2 and 9. I've got AlphaVAT for box 4 and box 7. Now, what you can do at this stage is anything regards to an adjustment, you can add. So in the example here, let's say I've got an example of bad debt relief. I can attach supporting documentation to corroborate that adjustment. Now, it's worth noting this does not get sent to the revenue. This is purely for your internal purposes. So you have supporting documentation to corroborate any adjustment. And once that adjustment is pushed through into the system, you will see you've got the date, the user, the description, supporting documentation, and the relevant changes applies to box 4 in this instance. If I now toggle back to the VAT return summary, and if I now go into box 4, I'll be able to see that adjustment coming through. Now, the next thing to know about AlphaVAT is because of the mapping, you've got the ability to drill down to your source data. So if I take the example of my purchases, I have the ability to drill down and I can see all my underlying calculations. We also have system level diagnostics. So again, if there are any discrepancies, the system will highlight that. Now, once that's done, if you're happy, you can tell the system, I now want to consolidate. So if you recall at the start, I had 3 entities. I am consolidating the top co. And if I now go back to my group, I can consolidate all 3 entities into the one. So at this point, if I mark this, give it a few seconds, you will now see on screen an amalgamation of all 3 entities. If I look at the VAT return group breakdown, I'll be able to see all 3 entities and boxes 1 to 9. At this point, again, I'll have a quick review of the numbers. I can finalize, and I can submit this on to HMRC. So hopefully that's given you a flavor of what AlphaVAT can do. Now, once the submission has been processed, you will see the receipt ID and the receipt timestamp. And what I want to do is, if I now toggle to a pre-populated file, you will see that as you use AlphaVAT, or whether you've been using AlphaBridge, the history of your historic VAT returns will start to build up. So you'll see on the left-hand side of the screen, I'm toggling through some VAT returns. What AlphaVAT allows you to do is go into an analytics tab. And within there, you have the ability to compare from one period to the next. You can see any cyclical spikes. You can see the VAT payable. In this instance, I've got it per quarter. And lastly, you have a data summary tab. So if you were to look and see what adjustments you've made that were manual, that were outside of the underlying ERP system, then in the example I've got in here, if you recall, I blocked some customer entertainment items. And from this screen, I can drill back down and see what transactions were blocked. You'll see there are my blocked transactions. If need be, you have the ability to export to Excel any reports within the system. And the last bit of the demonstration is just to show you that you have the ability through the portal to look through the payments and the liabilities.